Hello, thank you for joining us for Big Ideas in Supply Chain. I'm Allen Jacques. I'm an industry thought leader at Kinaxis, focusing on life sciences. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Elisabeth Kaszas from Seagen. Elisabeth is VP of Supply Operations and based on the West Coast. So thank you for getting up so early, Elisabeth. To start off, you've had a very interesting career path that I've kind of followed off and on. Could you just give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. And first of all, thanks, Allen and Kinaxis, for inviting me today. Yes, you and I have had a chance to work together over the past many years. And I've had the privilege to work for life science and biopharma companies for the past 30 plus years. It was extremely exciting for me to witness the deployment of the first bioreactors, the first chromatographic columns used for biologics manufacturing in the late 80s, to the launch of blockbuster therapeutic monoclonal antibodies in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's at that time, Allen, that I think you and I started to work together. And to the more recent launch of life-saving bispecific monoclonal antibodies and ADCs, antibody-drug conjugate, over the past 10 years. And I've worked in supply chain management over the past many years in the clinical and commercial settings. And I had really the opportunity to work at the global site and regional level in the US, but also in Europe and in Asia. And the reason for which I'm highlighting that to you today, Allen, is that these experiences combined, right, have allowed me to learn bottom up the complexity of the biopharma R&D and commercialization processes, and which supply chain capabilities, whether it's planning, procurement, global logistics, distribution, customer services, are required to ensure uninterrupted supply for life-saving medicines to patients around the world. So it's been a fun journey and really a privilege to work in biopharma.
Yes, and you really manage end-to-end supply chain, starting with phase 1 clinical studies. So you see it, years before it's launched. So that must be really exciting. Elisabeth, Seagen has a very interesting therapeutic technology called antibody-drug conjugates. I would bet that most of our audience does not know what that is. Could you explain a little bit about your technology and the kind of diseases that you treat with that?
Before I talk about the antibody-drug conjugate technology, and again, I may not be the best qualified person to talk about it, but I just want to highlight that I joined Seagen a couple of years ago. The company celebrates this year its 25th anniversary. It started 25 years ago to develop life-saving medicines with the help of a technology called ADC, or antibody-drug conjugate. It means that we combine monoclonal antibodies to cytotoxic agents to select cancer cells that will be selectively killed, right? In contrary to chemotherapy or other agent, it's a therapy which is highly selective of specific cancer cells. And for the past 25 years, the company has commercialized a number of these ADCs for advanced cancers. We now have 4 commercial products. 3 of them were launched within a very short period of 3 years over the past few years. And the pipeline of monoclonal antibodies combined with these cytotoxic agents with the help of a drug linker is really the main scope of Seagen's rich pipeline. We have a number of biopharma companies looking for innovative ways of curing cancer with the help of ADCs, and certainly Seagen is at the forefront of that fight.
Absolutely. It's an exciting place to be, and I love what you all are doing. And it's going to be really exciting to see where we'll be in the next 3 to 5 years with that. So Elizabeth, as you said, you joined Seagen a few years ago. It was 2 years ago or?
2 years ago, almost,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Could you describe when you walked in the door the first day, what you were faced with and, kind of your first 90 days and the challenges that you saw and decided to address?
Right, and that's a fair question. Before maybe I talk about challenges, I think it's important to highlight that the company has been extremely successful at launching a first product a few years ago at Cetris to treat Hodgkin lymphoma, and very recently launched 2 more ADCs, PADCEV to treat urothelial cancer, and TIVDAK for the treatment of adult patients with metastatic cervical cancer. And I should have mentioned that before, but I'm emphasizing the fact that the company, when I joined, was extremely busy launching brand new products in the US as well as in Europe for a 4th product, Kinaxis. That growth, right, associated with the launch of so many products within a very short window of time, created an exponential growth in terms of number of SKUs to manage and complexity of the supply chain. And I must say that the operations at Seagen have done a phenomenal job at bringing all these medicines to market to as many patients as feasible. As the company grew that fast, there was an opportunity to maybe look at how to scale up the operations, how to make sure that we really understand the demand signals as quickly as feasible and can translate them in production plans, in supply plans, and distribution capabilities that allow us to launch the product as fast as feasible, to ramp up as quickly as feasible. And it's along those lines that I was, I think, again, privileged to be part of the setup of the infrastructure, the capabilities in terms of processes, systems, and people. So the first 90 days for me were around understanding the strength of the organization as a whole and where we needed to invest more in terms of processes and systems to ensure we would be successful in the long term.
Since those first 90 days, tell us a little bit about your transformation, what you've been doing to prepare Seagen for the growth that's coming up in the other molecules that you'll be launching.
No, that's a very good question. And I don't think there's any unique recipe here. I think it's really about, as the company grew, we need to remain agile, right? Which was really the fabric of Seagen for so many years, innovative and agile. We also needed to set up a more maybe robust set of roles and responsibilities and processes to ensure that we would be able to sustain the volume and the complexity of going from a handful of commercial products across a few countries to commercializing in dozens of countries in America, in the Americas, in Europe, and rest of world. And to do that, I went maybe where a lot of supply chain leaders would go. I ensured that we would have a very robust demand planning process with early signals, with rapid feedback loops to ensure that the market signals would translate into changes to our supply plans as rapidly and as efficiently as possible. I really believe in the role of supply chain in connecting commercial and clinical demand signals to the manufacturing facilities, the distribution network, the transportation, third-party logistics service providers, right? And to do that, you really need to have a very robust demand and supply planning process and system capabilities. We use an ERP system, Oracle, very well implemented and established. However, Oracle is an execution system. And for us to understand the dynamic nature of the demand, of the launches, of the reimbursement dynamics across a number of countries, it was important to establish some more advanced planning capabilities, which is where I focused, I think, the team's effort to start with. It was also, I think, quite important to not only clarify the roles and responsibilities, set up robust systems and processes. It was also important to have a forum where those end-to-end signals translating into changes to our investment, right, in inventory or in new capabilities, would be reviewed and agreed upon by our executive management team across operations, finance, commercial, clinical. So we engaged in setting up an integrated planning process, an integrating business planning process with the support of executive management. So when we were faced with situations where maybe the demand and supply plans were not fully aligned because of significant changes to demand or supply, it was important for us to get together to understand the different impacts of changes to demand or supply, and what the decisions would be to ensure that we would meet the needs of all functions within the company, and foremost to ensure uninterrupted supply to patients. So I must say that IBP journey that we started at Seagen a year plus ago has really proven to be quite successful. I think there's a better end-to-end visibility, and we are able to understand when decisions need to be made cross-functionally and not just within operations when it comes to investments in terms of supply, production, inventory, and so forth.
I'm very curious because I've been in this situation. You're in phase 3 clinical, you're getting ready to file, you have a manufacturing network that has to gear up for commercial launch, and you have a forecast. And everyone knows, that there's not a lot of history to base that forecast on because it's a new indication. So how have you managed that to make sure that you're best prepared for launch, and who have been the key players that you've interfaced with to try to get that right?
Great question. I'm actually very proud of the global supply operations leaders and team, because it's not a change that happens overnight. It happens, month after month, where we gain insights into the demand signals, right? And we understand the complexity of the different cancers, right, we are targeting, and understand the layers of patient populations. We understand the barriers to accessing these drugs for some of the patients. So we work very closely with the Global Insight organization, so the organization in charge of generating a commercial forecast, clinical and commercial, but certainly on the commercial side, we have that detailed understanding of the demand forecast, not just for one country and one SKU, but for that SKU, what are the different layers of patients, right, that may benefit from this innovative medicine, and what are the opportunities, but also the risks for these patients to not access treatment from the get-go. And we develop scenarios, demand and supply scenarios, the optimistic view of, okay, so many patients will be able to access the treatment, to maybe not what we call more pessimist scenarios. And we try to develop a supply plan that will, if possible, cover all ranges of demand scenarios. If not, we have to make a decision with the help of our executive management in terms of, okay, which demand level do we think we need to supply? And to your point, it comes sometimes with significant investment, right? Are we going to start today an investment in a manufacturing facility that will supply 5 years down the road. It's not unique to biopharma, but we deal with very long lead times, and we all try to reduce them. It still takes so many weeks to produce a monoclonal antibody. It still takes so many weeks to conjugate the monoclonal antibody with the drug linker, to fill, right? Whether you use syringes or whether you use vials, liquid or lyo formulations, and package. So as fast as we all want to be, it still takes months, right, to produce life-saving therapies. And it also requires us to have some safety stock buffers, right? We are not a just-in-time industry. I mean, I don't think it's worked, right, for anyone to try to be just-in-time. We need some level of inventory. So if you combine the end-to-end lead times with the lead times associated with the safety stocks, if you translate these safety stocks in month forward coverage, you end up with the need to have demand signals 2 or 3 years down the road to know how much to produce today in terms of monoclonal antibodies. And manufacturing facilities of monoclonal antibodies are rather significant investments, right? The industry is doing a fantastic job at lowering the costs and at making sure that we find very innovative ways to produce fast. However, it still takes time. So maybe it's a long response to your simple question, but I think that detailed understanding of the demand scenarios allow us to generate supply scenarios and translate these supply scenarios into what it means in terms of capacity. Do we have the appropriate capacity internally, externally? Do we need to invest now, and where and how, so that a comprehensive conversation can happen rather quickly? And in order to do that, it's really connecting all the dots across the supply chain. It's also having the ability to generate supply scenarios, demand and supply scenarios, capacity scenarios as quickly as feasible to enable, right, the most strategic conversation. So I see the role of my team to provide really these scenarios for strategic conversations as early as feasible.
I know from my experience, you're talking about lead times. The most significant lead times are the quality steps in between each of those operations, and they very often take much longer than the actual manufacturing. And then you think about qualifying a new facility, and validating a new facility. That's what adds up to these really long lead times to ramp up.
Yes.
So.
And that's a good point, Allen. And I just want to add maybe one comment, which is what I've seen also over the past many years is now we have access to analytics with the help of a lot of digital tools that maybe didn't exist many years ago. And we have the ability to get a ton of analytical insights, right, into our end-to-end lead times. And we have the ability to understand and where, right, we have, the most inventory, or where it takes us the longest time. And, with some value stream mapping, with some continuous improvement focus on, hey, how can we reduce, the disposition cycle time from so many weeks to so many days, or how can we sometimes reduce, the prep time prior to manufacturing? The manufacturing lead times are usually set, right? I mean, there's not much you can do except ensuring that you start the manufacturing process per plan. But yes, you are right. I think it's a cross-functional effort across really operations, right, to reduce these lead times. And some great work is done in that space as well.
Yeah, that would be a great topic for our next big ideas in supply chain. But yes. I heard a quote many years ago that I still believe today, and that's cycle time as a single metric may be the best measurement of an organization's health. So I've really validated that many times over the years. So Elisabeth, one last question, and I hope you have your global hat on for this one, but if you were the chief supply chain officer for the world, what would be your transformation plan?
Well, Alan, I'm not sure about the chief supply chain officer of the world. I mean, I love the expression, but looking at the biopharma industry, if there was one thing I would want to change overnight, if you want, is our ability to standardize data transfers between all players, right? Biopharma companies, contract manufacturing organizations, third-party logistic providers, raw material suppliers. I mean, we all have interfaces. We all know the different technologies we can use to make these interfaces robust. But when you think about it, right, we are lacking those highways to allow us to exchange data with all the security measures, right? Nobody wants their data set to be shared with anyone. That goes without saying, right? I mean, I feel a bit silly to even have to mention it, but we are lacking those, data highways, for lack of a better word. I'm not, by any means an IT subject matter expert, but I feel that this conversation has happened within the biopharma world for quite some time. So maybe we are at a point where some significant efforts can be made and collaboration also can happen to really set up this easier way to share data. We all use the same 3PLs, CMOs, or raw material suppliers, right, when we produce biologics, and it would be nice to not have to reset interfaces here and there. And I'm talking about the large biopharma as well as the smaller, newer biopharma, right? I think as an industry, as a biologics biopharma community, I think there's quite a bit we can do in that space. And don't get me wrong, there are significant efforts there. I'm not sure one effort is really leading the way. So that's what I would maybe want to change from the get-go.
Well, that would be great, Elisabeth, and that would definitely have an impact on patients around the world, a very positive one, if we could do that.
To your point, Alan, it's about reducing lead times, right? How long it takes to bring an innovative medicine to patients. And within supply chain, we need to play our role in that space. Yeah.
Great. Elisabeth, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who's listening in to our Big Ideas in Supply Chain. And be sure to look for our next session and join us for that.